Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining. Welcome to the Huddle. And we're going to give participants a couple more seconds to get into the room. And we want to honor the time of those that have showed up on time. Good to see everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. I love seeing people on video. I really do. 55% of our communication is our body language. So when you turn your video off, you give up 55% of your effectiveness. So I'm really, really excited to see those that are here that are brave enough to turn their cameras on. All right. It's a good time to grab a notepad. We've attached a document in the chat. It's a worksheet card that I created that will help you to capture salient points. So please take really good notes. All right. We're going to get started and we're going to really honor the time that you have chosen to invest in yourself. All right. So welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see you, albeit virtually. I'm glad we have an opportunity to sit down for an hour and to really discuss something that is top of mind for each one of you. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're joining from. My name is Lorene Phillips, and I'm the founder and CEO of Clarendon Wallace, a boutique professional consulting firm here in Bermuda, and we do work across the globe. I am really thrilled about this topic. Personally, I've experienced so many transitions as an underwriting executive and now working as an entrepreneur. And so I'm really delighted to host this conversation with my fellow panelists. The Huddle is a virtual platform that was created probably about 2 years ago, targeting Gen Zers, helping to equip them for the workplace. But, well, what basically happened was a lot of other people, a little bit more mature, decided that they would jump onto the Huddle because the topics that we were addressing were very much on point, and perhaps topics that were not addressed for those particular demographics during their career development. So now we have rebranded the Huddle, and it is a platform for the multi-generational workplace, equipping them to succeed at work. So I'm going to turn right over to my wonderful panelists who have been just so courageous and so available to me to make themselves right here available to answer any questions that you may have and to share their experience in their capacity. So grab your notepads. Make sure that your environment is suitable for the next hour or so. Make sure that you are focused, and thank you for choosing to spend this time with us to invest in yourself. So Victoria, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lorene. So I just completed a major career shift from international business into the third sector. So I now am Executive Director for BFIS, who are the Bermuda Foundation for Insurance Studies. And I basically spent 21 years in the reinsurance industry in Bermuda. And as Lorene said, in her career, my career has been varied. So I started off in claims and local insurance, then went into reinsurance broking, and then moved into underwriting. So in my current role as Executive Director, I'm basically helping students and some, as Lorene put it, more mature individuals with pursuing careers in our international business community in Bermuda.
Thank you, Victoria, for that wonderful introduction. And literally across the pond, we have Pierre, and Pierre is going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his role as a recruiter. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Yeah, not as long career just yet in insurance like my colleagues and peers, but I've joined the industry a couple of years ago now, only have sort of done insurance recruitment, senior hires. Recently have transitioned over to Equity City, where we've really been trying to champion diversity and inclusion within the insurance industry, and really addressing that underrepresentation by focusing on talent of diversity within Lloyd's of London. Everywhere from sort of senior sort of management level all the way down to sort of school leavers, really trying to make a difference. So yeah, everything from beyond recruitment, really fostering forums for programs, and really engaging in events to really help that dial in unrepresentation in the market.
Thank you, Pierre. And Pierre, I met a couple of years ago in London, and we just connected really nicely, and our values are very much aligned in terms of what it is that we want to do to support individuals that are looking for a career change, a career shift, or maybe individuals who find themselves at the end of a redundancy that was unexpected, and are maybe decided that they need a change. Maybe they are looking for an opportunity to re-engage and to be excited again about their career. Or maybe you have made a misstep in your career and you are trying to determine what's your next best step and how to really set yourself up to succeed. And I call it your 2.0. So it really doesn't matter what stage of your journey that you're in. As long as you're ready to make that change and to try something new, then you're in the right place. So I'm going to start off with my first question for Victoria. Victoria, based on your experience and knowledge and the work that I know that you did historically with BFAS around career shifters, what would you say are some of the most important steps for someone to consider that is looking at making that career change? Or sometimes it's a full change, sometimes it's a shift, sometimes it's starting all over again. What are some of the things that you would suggest?
So I did this exact exercise in March when I was considering BFIS. So I've been involved with the charity for a long time, kind of volunteering as a mentor and on the board. But one of the things I consciously did, and I sat down and I said, right, what am I good at and what am I weak at? So understanding, you have to look internally and who are you? So what was I good at? What am I weak at? And then what do I enjoy the most? And then what do I hate doing? Like, what are the tasks that I keep putting off? And those things kind of pinpointed for me that a lot of the international business skills that I'd picked up in the last, 20 years were actually relevant to other things. So if you're looking at shifting and, maybe you're in teaching or education and you want to get into, some kind of office administrative role or into the industry, what are you good at? Are you good at data entry, at being, have you got that attention to detail? Can you sit in an office? I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to make loads of money and whatever. But if you don't like sitting behind a desk, you might want to be realistic about whether it's for you. So I think definitely looking internally and saying, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And then quite frankly, if you're going to be working, you might as well enjoy it, right? So what do you enjoy doing? So I like the people element. So, we're always meeting students, career shifters. So I think that's got to be a pretty important step to say, are you actually equipped to do it? And then you just need to work out what those skills are and how you can transfer them. So, you might be in education, but you need to be able to transfer it. You might be in a marketing department, you might be in telecommunications. Make them relevant to the role that you want to be in. So be that on your resume, be that in cover letters, be that on LinkedIn, because to a potential employer, it might not be obvious when they see that you're, whatever your current role is, they want to see that you can project into that new role.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for using yourself as an example. And certainly for myself, having done it 5 times in the industry, and then obviously as an entrepreneur, just constantly evolving and changing as my clients' demands change. The most important thing that you've mentioned that I really want to highlight is self-awareness, being aware of what your strengths are and knowing what it is that you're really good at and knowing what you're not good at, so that you're playing to your strength and that you're leveraging your strength, and that you're able to know not just what your strengths are, but how to articulate that when you're in an interview. So Pierre, this leads nicely to your side of the equation. How does someone really go about leveraging and highlighting their strengths, especially when they're transferring it from another industry into an industry that they're interested in being a part of? How do they go about articulating that in an interview and making sure that they highlight that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one I find myself covering a lot, especially when you're speaking with people who are making that change, especially into the insurance market. I think we all know the market is quite, you know, uh, incestuous in terms of they want people who've been in the market. But if you haven't been in the market, how do you get experience in the market, right? So I think again, self-awareness is a big one there. It's about kind of looking at what skills allow you to do your role effectively, right? What allows you to stand out amongst your peers in the market? What's your selling point? And I think there's a couple of key sort of words that stand out to me. Communication skills. I think that's something where you can either be really good at it, or you can improve on it. But it's something that's needed. And with any role you're going to do, you need to be able to communicate effectively. Now, if that's, working within a team and collaborative, being able to share ideas, thought of mind, diversity, thought of mind, it's always going to be needed, especially when you're sort of, speaking in interviews or speaking to stakeholders, then that's going to come across the first thing. The second thing I would say is honestly around active listening. If that's not the first thing, it'll be the second thing. And it's really being able to, take in certain questions and answer them effectively, getting to the point, being able to structure, your sentences really well, and really looking at what out of those things, another thing might be leadership skills, another thing might be problem solving, but what are you really good at? And then taking that thing that you're really good at it and then applying it to whatever role that is, and really showcasing that. So I think again, it's a real self-awareness sort of thing you need to be able to do, and look at, and then utilizing that to effectively transition that into a role.
I really like you really highlighting how communication skills play a significant role in really separating you from the pack. Often when I work with clients, one of the first thing I do as a baseline is really ensuring that my clients know what their strengths are, and then being able to quickly determine what are those areas that they need to work on in order to close the gap, in order to be attractive and to really stand out from the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Many people don't think of active listening as one of those skill sets. We're talking about interpersonal skills here, but the ability to be able to listen well and then to be able to ask those great intelligent questions in an interview process are critical in terms of demonstrating how you think and how strategic you can be, and how the problem solving as well, that problem solving skill set gets an opportunity to be highlighted. So this leads us nicely. I'm not sure if Aaron is on the line. Aaron, are you on the line as yet? If he's not, we'll just continue. Okay, so one of the
Hi, Lorraine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All right, great. So Aaron is on the line. So Aaron, the question I want to ask is around preparing your CV and LinkedIn. So if Simone could just spotlight Aaron for me, that would be great. Aaron works with me in terms of helping our clients to position, or should I say, reposition their CVs and their LinkedIn and get those assets to be as accurate as possible, but making sure that it highlights their transferable skills. And I know that is one of the areas that causes a lot of anxiety, because I'm going to use myself as an example. If you've been working in a role for 10 years or 15 years and you have not been in the market, and someone asks you to put together your CV, it can be very daunting. There's also the demographics. I won't say the more mature. Yeah, I've just said it. The more mature employees who shy away from social media. I have colleagues and friends who are very, very senior in the market, and they don't even have a LinkedIn, or they have a LinkedIn page, but they don't have an image, they don't have a profile picture, or they don't have any description, or maybe they have 10 people that is in their connection. And when I ask, why aren't you on LinkedIn? Their view is like, oh, it's social media. So I decided I will pull Aaron into the room with me, because he supports me and my clients on this side. First of all, Aaron, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me again.
All right, so two things, Aaron, that I really want to address with you. One is, how do you deal with the angst or the uncomfortableness that some clients or some individuals have around social media and by extension, LinkedIn?
Yeah, of course. I think the first thing is always to remember is social media. We're in an age now where thankfully people are understanding that we don't need to all have the same approach or thoughts regarding social media. So for example, back when it first started, we had everyone was open, everyone can access everyone. But just like that, now there are many things you can put into play to kind of protect yourself. So for example, I tell my clients all the time with LinkedIn, you don't need to have your whole LinkedIn experience there where you feel like everyone knows what school you went to and who you're friends with and all of that. You can literally put into place those kind of borders and boundaries. That way you can really make it as top tier as you want it to until you decide to continue that relationship. So for example, you can have just the standard things like your picture, your headline, as well as kind of, like I said, a quick summary of what it is you do in your role. And then once you end up getting that kind of confirmation saying, you know what, this is someone that I've really met before, I can verify that I know them, that they're trustworthy, that I'm interested in this role to begin with, then you can open up a bit more to make it a bit more of, like I said, a relationship that you feel like you have an equal partnership in to develop.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. So it can be a step-by-step approach. I will also add on to that, Aaron, for the younger generation, so we're talking like our Gen Zers, really heads up that this is not TikTok.
It is not
LinkedIn is a
TikTok.
professional platform. It is not TikTok. So I really want you to understand that the professionalism that you want to project to your potential employers need to be evident on your LinkedIn platform. There needs to be a seamless flow. If they're looking at your CV or your resume and on your LinkedIn profile, there should be a continuity or consistency with what they're experiencing from you. Aaron, I'm going to park the CV for a little bit later, but I really wanted you to touch on the LinkedIn. So if anyone that is on this call that is not on LinkedIn, your homework right now is to get on LinkedIn. It is free. There is no reason why you need not be there. There are about 1 billion people or so on LinkedIn since the pandemic. This is where recruiters are coming to find clients. So it is, if you're interested in transitioning and changing jobs, in expanding your network, then you need to be on LinkedIn. So Victoria, I am familiar with how you kind of arrive at the position that you're at. So I thought this question would be perfect for you. What are some creative or non-traditional ways that individuals can use or consider to tap into or to break into a new area?
Well, so I guess from my perspective, a lot of it was I was involved on committees and volunteering within the organization. So I guess, I already knew that this was what I wanted to do. I guess for someone who's looking to go into something completely different, I have one of the BFIS seekers out there who managed, she's a teacher, but so she's off for summers. She managed to get a student summer internship this summer, right? If you are in education and you do have that time off, use it wisely. You could even say to a company, can I come in and do 2 weeks work shadow for free? And, you don't have to pay me. That shows initiative, right? If you are, so I was working with a guy that worked at Marketplace. For those not in Bermuda, that's one of our shopping supermarket chains. And he'd never worked in an office before. And he wanted to get into the reinsurance industry. I said, okay, well, you might not make it because you haven't shown that office experience. So he went, and it was a hospitality role, but it was in an office. So he got that experience. So it's looking at, and I talked earlier about the transferable skills, but it's making sure that you've got the skills that are necessary to get you there. So I would say just be always, and that's with LinkedIn as well, be projecting where you're going to be. Don't be sitting back thinking, well, I'm a teacher. No, be thinking I'm an aspiring reinsurance professional. And then how, what do I need to do to get there?
Yes, I really do like that. It's really about putting yourself out there and not, having a clear idea of where you want to be. So earlier, Victoria, you talked about, the exercise that you went through, what are the skills that I have? What are my strengths, etc. I think equally as important. I think you need to be very clear about where you want to be in the next 5 years. I personally think the next 3 years. I can't think 5 years. Or where do you want to be in the next 5 months? And then be very clear about what that looks like and what the priorities are for you and what steps you may need to take. Maybe one of the action steps is to get onto LinkedIn and to set up your profile. Maybe an action step is to start putting together your CV and to get the help around that. Whatever that is, being clear about what that next step is. So Pierre, I'm sure you see a lot of CVs that come across your desk. So I'm curious, how do you decide which one goes to the top?
It's a great question, and I think if I knew it every single time, I'd have a lot higher success rate, which my manager will be very happy about. But I think I can definitely touch on some of the things that definitely land better for hiring managers. I think as a recruiter, obviously it's my best interest to get the candidate I'm representing an interview, right? I can't sit the interview for them, but I can help them best get in front of the hiring manager. So I think there's definitely a couple of things that I've seen that's worked really, really well. One of them you definitely mentioned, well, both Aaron and Victoria mentioned, which is networking. Networking is essentially one of the most vital tools, especially in this day and age, with social media being at its heightened and people obviously coming back to, the office and being in the city again, especially in London. It means that being active, being someone who constantly shows up at events, being someone who's constantly posting and sharing information about insight findings on LinkedIn. I know Aaron kind of mentioned in terms of just kind of setting up your LinkedIn, but then what's next from there? From there, it's all about creating a brand, being credible as being someone who is reliable with information, someone who's been consistently there, creates credibility, which essentially is what you want of your brand, right? You want people to kind of believe in what you say. So I think that's one of the main things. Another thing I would say is around the profile and, the profile you put forward to the client. So things that may include is around the cover letter, first and foremost. I think cover letter kind of seems like kind of a dinosaur thing in this day and age in terms of no one really wants to do it because I think people think if I put myself forward for this application, I'm either good or I'm not. They're going to either want me or not. That couldn't be the furthest from the truth. I think hiring managers really appreciate the time it takes for someone to write out the reasons why they want to apply for that role. It really does make a massive difference. A step further from that is aligning your profile to the role. So you might be doing a career transition, or you might be going into maybe a different area of business that's maybe a step up or completely different. Why does then your profile, you might have the right skills, you might have the right qualifications, but then why does someone like you want to do that role? So it's really about allowing that person, whoever's reading your profile, the hiring manager, to really get an insight of the way you're thinking and where you are on your journey in a summary of your actual CV. So that's important, and I would always tailor that and tweak that for every job you go into. And I know it's quite tedious and it might seem quite long to do it, but honestly, it's such a difference maker. Now, one of the last things I'll touch on is around company research and around doing your research on the hiring manager as well. So all my prep interviews, whenever I'm sitting down before the candidate goes into an interview, we always go on the company page. We go through, some of the recent changes within the business, things that might affect their role, but equally, going on to the hiring manager's LinkedIn, and this helps if they have a LinkedIn, going and seeing their past sort of history, if there's been any synergy between potentially similar companies, similar connections that you may have, and all that type of stuff. It really allows you to kind of open the door for more rapport building at the start of that conversation. And obviously having a good recruiter always helps as well, but Loki, slight plug.
Yeah, not bad. A couple of things I want to highlight, and thank you for sharing that, Pierre, is one is the cover letter. Cover letters are back. I worked with a very, very senior attorney maybe 2 weeks ago on drafting a cover letter. And guys, it took us almost an hour. And this person is quite smart. We were wordsmithing that particular cover letter. We got it. I mean, we should frame it when we were done. We were so excited when we were finished with this cover letter. And that, along with her CV, got her the interview, and she's waiting, fingers crossed, she's waiting for a second call. But it's been a while since I've actually spent time on cover letters. I've done a lot of work with CVs and with LinkedIn, but cover letters in particular is your opportunity to highlight why it is that you should be considered. And I always say that recruiters and hiring managers are very, very busy. So as much as you can make their job easier by really separating and highlighting why you're the best candidate. That could be the difference between being on the top of the pile and being at the bottom of the pile. The other thing I also wanted to mention was when it comes to your CVs is I always say have one main CV. So that's your your go-to, the one that has everything all the way to, I don't know, kindergarten, right? You have that on the side. But then from there, you are preparing multiple versions of your CVs that will morph and evolve depending on the job that you are looking for or applying for. So I typically say, when they look at the job description and overlay your CV, it should fit in quite nicely, almost like that. When it does that, then it becomes very easy for your CV to rise to the top of the pile using the same language, using the same verbiage and words that are in the job description so that your CV can stand out. So Erin, I'm going to bring Erin back up to the front of the room. You do a lot of work for our firm around CVs. What are some of the typical pitfalls that you see that you'd like to highlight and then how do you address those? Maybe one or two.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest one, which I think we can probably all understand now with this conversation, as Peter said, about making sure that your CV actually falls in line with the job description. I think a lot of times when we're in the industry specifically, you hear things like the buzzwords of underwriter, broker. So you just think YouTube or Google underwriter CV and say, oh, I can make it look like that. And that's not the case at all. It needs to be unique to you. It needs to be authentic to who you are. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of times the job description, that's just kind of what they're looking for from a top perspective. But when they meet you, that's what they can really get to say, this person will fit that role. This person will really be the one we're looking for. So it's very important that you're very including not only just what you need in terms of your basic skills, but those soft skills, as Lorraine said earlier. So I think the biggest thing for that would be making sure that you're creating a CV that's not just copy and paste. It has to be unique to you. That's the biggest thing. And the second thing I'd probably add is making sure your CV is quantifiable. I think a lot of times we look at CVs, which write down, I worked at this place from this year to that year. It was fun. And then you move on to the next point. And it can't just be that. It needs to be, why was it good? Why did you add value to it? Why was it impactful? And those whys are what helps sometimes those kind of recruiters or those hiring managers to make a decision before they meet you. And that's what those things should be. Your CV, your LinkedIn should do all the hard work for you. So by the time you get to the conversation or the time you get to the interview, it's literally just easy flow and kind of seeing a conversation instead of proving why you should be in that room. So I would say be authentic with your CV. Make sure you're not just putting something you think they want to hear. Make sure you're saying what you really want to show and present yourself in the best way. And then also sure you're quantifying it. So for example that would be, instead of saying, I worked at the company for 6 years and we had 0 faults, you can say, I worked at the company improving the processing and ensuring it with 100% accuracy. Those small things make it really easy for them to understand the impact that you have. And it also make them see, oh, well, we're doing a similar problem. They've already solved that their last role. They might be a really good one for us to have here. So those two things would definitely be something I would recommend. I see a lot in our clients in terms of those ones to take them over to the next level.
Thank you. And sometimes it's so hard to remember all the great things that you've done. So if anyone has listened to me over the last few years, remember I tell you to have a brag sheet, okay, write down all of your accomplishments so that when it comes to crafting your CV, you have the data in order to prove why you're the best candidate for the job. And I'll also just put a plug in there. AI is here and it's here to stay. I think it's a great tool. I think it can really be helpful in setting up the framework when you're putting together your CV or any other document. But please, please, please don't just go on ChatGPT and say, create a CV for XYZ. Imagine everybody else does that and all the CV coming in looking exactly the same. Okay, so integrity in crafting your CV, uniqueness, and showing your the hiring manager and the recruiter that you've spent the time to develop a document that is uniquely you. All right, I'm going to pause for 5 seconds and I'm going to check to see if there are any questions in the chat or any comments that maybe our panelists can address. Let's see. Okay, there are no questions, so that means we're just ticking along. All right. Okay, so Victoria, I'm coming back to you. How can individuals continue to make sure that they are upskilling and staying relevant for the industry or for the next career step that they're looking at making? So that it could be that you're within an organization and you want to go to the next level, you want to be promoted. It could be that you're moving from one industry to another, or maybe you retired and now you've decided, oh, I want a second bite at the apple and do something different. What are some of the things that they can do to help and to upskill and to close that gap?
So I think one of the things I would say is get an idea of what you actually need, because a lot of times people say, oh, well, I need to have the CPCU, this big insurance exam to get to the next level. Well, that might not be the case. So, what I would suggest is speaking to people in those positions that you want to be in to see what exactly, what skills do I need? The other thing is there are a lot of free options out there. So, for example, for the insurance industry, there is the institutes.org, which has a million free courses or, cheaper courses. What I would suggest not spending massive amounts of money unless you're actually in a company trying to get ahead, because the companies are going to pay once you get there. But also going back to our friends at LinkedIn, there's LinkedIn Learning, right? Or there's Google. Do you need to brush up on your Excel skills or whatever? Because these are things that, I'm pretty useless at Excel, but I have to use it every day. So, being able to create pivot tables and all that kind of thing, or even creating presentations, these are all things that will help you. And I think if you've spoken to people that are in those positions to get kind of a good idea, then you'll be, I guess, more targeted or more focused in where you need to go. But at the same time, I'd say no learning is bad learning. So every day is a learning opportunity. But just, I guess, be conscious about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. And, I will tell you, one of the positive development post the pandemic is the ability to learn so much more online. I mean, the fact that we're able to have this webinar and have Pierre from London, Erin is dialing in from Manchester, Victoria is in Bermuda, and I'm actually in the US on business, that we can get together and have this webinar just really opens up the options that are available to all of us to invest in ourselves. And that requires commitment. It requires commitment in terms of your own personal development. Even as an entrepreneur, I have a goal about how many hours that I would like to spend on developing myself so that I can stay current, I can stay relevant, and I can stay on the edge so that I can take advantage of opportunities as they come up. So Pierre, as we're looking at just really people upskilling and closing those gaps and making sure that they have the skill set, what are some of the ways that individuals can build relevant work experience in transitioning into any industry? That could be IB or any other industry that might be less formal.
Yeah, okay, it's an interesting one because I do, I would love to say it's an easy journey. As mentioned, I work with a lot of young professionals, transitioning careers, but equally someone who's maybe, been in their career for the last 5 to 10 years, looking to make a change as well. And yeah, I think there's some practical lessons that I've seen that's worked really well, and there's also some physical ones as well. I think the practical ones is very similar to what Aaron and Victoria is kind of speaking about. And the first question you should ask yourself is, what do you need? How do you ask that question, and who do you ask it to? That then ties into networking. Being able to reach out to people who are already in positions of where you want to get to is probably one of the easiest ways to avoid mistakes that they had previously made in their journeys. A story I can kind of pull from that maybe highlights this really well is a person had started their role, let's say, for example, this is in technology, and was very, very smart and intelligent when it came to using stuff like Excels, pivot tables, all those, Power BI, SQL, all those type of stuff, but wanted to transition more into insurance focused roles away from maybe more of the tech type of stuff. So, one thing that they did very well is practically is upskill themselves on the insurance knowledge. So that was going out, doing a course in insurance, understanding what the actual market is, what does it look like, what is insurance, what is reinsurance. So then they can then add that skill, which they kind of was lacking, to their already existing skill, which was their USP, unique selling point, to create a very sort of, admirable profile to say. The more the more physical thing, I think, is more of a mental thing. And I think it's something called resilience. It's easy saying, you're going to do all the right things, you're going to do the qualification, you have the right skill sets, but then you apply for a role, you don't get it. So you think to yourself, all right, cool, well, maybe this pathway is not for me. No, I think it's about putting yourself in positions where, you are set up for success, of course, but then understanding that it might not work out on the first time, it might not work out the second time, it might not work out the third time. But it's about being resilient to knowing this is what I want to do, so I'm going to keep going at it. And that person who stuck at it, like I said, didn't have all the skills, but upscaled themselves on the insurance side, went for interviews, didn't get the first couple of ones, went for, but eventually did land the role he wanted to get. So I think that's a great story to kind of reflect to when you're thinking to yourself, listen, you can have all the right things, but you still might not get it. So it's about having the right things accompanied with the right mindset to be patient with yourself to get there in the end.
That is, so many times, if I get a penny for every time I hear this, oh, I've been applying, I haven't gotten a job, I've gotten so many rejections, and they're giving up. And so here are a couple of things that I say, building on what Pierre has just said. One is be realistic with the time frame. The fact that you're moving from one area into another area, there is definitely a long stretch in front of you in terms of establishing yourself, people knowing who you are, what your strengths are, what skills you have to offer. You perhaps have to build a brand new network as well. That takes time as well. Also, bear in mind that when you are making this transition, that you're going to need grit. You said resilience, right? Grit, persistence, passion, and self-belief. And above all, I will ask that you take care of yourself. When you are transitioning or moving into a new area, it can take a toll on your mental well-being, especially if you've gone through a redundancy, whether you knew the redundancy was coming or not. Actually, it really doesn't matter. I want to be clear that the job is redundant, not you. And so many times we think it's the same, that I'm redundant. No, the job is redundant. It's not you. But there is a high level of self-care that is necessary. So I tell my clients and anyone that I speak to, take care of yourself, be good to yourself, surround yourself with really positive people. When you hear no, it just means not now, not yet. Okay, just be persistent, have that nice grit, and understand that there is something for you on the other side. Just keep going, just keep going. It's like Nemo in that movie. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Sometimes you just have to keep doing that. But I promise you that you continue doing what it is that you're doing and taking care of yourself. When you get that opportunity for that interview, people will be so connected with your beautiful energy that they can actually see you working with them. So no matter how perfect your your CV is, or how perfect your LinkedIn is, when you get an opportunity to have an interview, that is your moment to sell yourself. And people want to do business with people they know, people they like, and people they trust. So the energy that you bring with you is phenomenally important. So please, 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 please take care of yourself through what can be a very stressful, anxious, and worrisome period. But I promise you, it can also be the most exciting opportunity. Victoria is there to tell you. It can be the most freeing opportunity when you position yourself to go forward and be courageous enough to go for that next step and that next big move. All right. So I think there are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me see. Don't you just like the internet? Let's see.
How can a newly graduate create a compelling resume on LinkedIn to apply for a position outside of her degree?
Oh, I love that one. So this is where someone has studied a discipline. Aaron, you're going to have to go for this because you did this. And then you're applying for a job that may not be directly related to the degree that you've studied. So for example, you may have done a degree in chemistry, right? I'm working with a client, did a degree in chemistry, and they want to move into the IB. And so they're trying to figure out how do they position themselves and on LinkedIn and also really into their CV as well to make their assets compelling. Aaron, what's your take on that?
Yeah, this is definitely one up my alley. If anyone knows me, they know that I've had quite a few career paths, many, many interests. So I am very much so well aligned with this kind of response. And the biggest thing is just transferable skills. Transferable skills, it does not require you to have a level of expert. You don't need to be an expert in the field. You have to have so many different competencies that you're impressive. It's about showing the fact that you're able to learn and apply what you've learned to something new. If you think about it, that's what any degree is, right? Any degree that we do in terms of a principle just shows that you were able to dedicate yourself for about 3 or 4 years, and now you've been able to get to the end of it. And so with your transferable skills, again, to the quantifiable point I made earlier, that's what helps bridge that gap. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you were, for example, working, let's say you were a baker and you did baking or your summer internship. So, you could say, instead of you saying, I worked at a baking shop and I made muffins, very cut and dry, very easy and fluffy, but how did it impact the business? So you can then say, I worked at, a bakery over the summer, working with an average of, 24 customers per day, helping increase the productivity by X%, right? These are all things that can kind of add into it. So you go into a conversation about business, they can say, oh, this person has account management perspective. They also have finance perspective. They have opportunity to work with people. Those soft skills are what we're looking for. And that's an example of how something so easy, simple, maybe out of touch with what you're looking for, especially in the international business sector, that can be transferable. And the same works vice versa. So if you're working in a position where you're working in international business, you want to go something a bit more creative, a bit more different, you can be from an underwriter to operations, or how Victoria has done, right? Use those kind of skill sets working in a bit more of a hard skill element to then go into more of a soft skill element and still have that impactful. It's all about transferable skills and selling it from that point.
Thank you. So it's all about transferable skills and not getting too bogged down by, whatever that title is. Okay. I was thinking about just so many people that have moved into the IB space that have done degrees that one would say is unrelated, but it fits so nicely. And to Pierre's point, when he was introducing himself around diversity of talent, it's the same thing that comes to mind when you're looking at diversity of skill set and diversity of individuals, is to understand that we need the arts, we need the fine arts, we need the mathematicians, we need the introverts, we need the extroverts, we need a mixture of diverse talents and skill set to make any company and organization thrive and have a sustainable future and success. So Pierre, I'm curious, you've probably placed quite a few people that have transferred and moved into the insurance industry or the reinsurance industry. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you would tell them to look out for, say, the first 3 months, the first 90 days? What are some of the things that they should be focusing on when they make that transition?
Fantastic question. And it's one I don't even just say to candidates in the market. I say it to my peers, I say it to my mates. And it's a big thing is internal branding. We think sometimes once we get into an organization, cool, we've got the job, you're good, right? You just need to kind of get past your probation. As long as you hit your right targets, whatever that may be, or KPIs, whatever it is, you're doing well. I say that's half the job. The other half of the job is really building up a brand internally, not just externally, but internally. And what that looks like is being someone who has traits of someone who is credible, someone who's reliable. That means, if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you're saying you're going to do something in a time frame and you're not able to do it in that time frame, have good communication. It's about kind of mixing and mingling with people who may not be people in your team or you interact all day to day sort of, interactions, but someone who, you go into the kitchen and you're like, giving them a compliment or asking how their day's going. That starts to build up a internal brand where someone in finance, when you work in tech, knows who you are, right? And in some way or not, will always come back. People always ask questions, especially when it's, your senior exec meetings, they ask, oh, how's X, Y, and Z doing? If more than one person, especially people who are not in your team, can vouch for you and, kind of look at you as a credible person, that has such a great impact on your internal branding. The next thing I would kind of say is around finding those people who are able to kind of be your, and I know that's one of our favorite words, Lorraine, allies. Find your allies in the company and organization. Find out who could potentially be your mentor, who's someone who you see as someone who represents excellence in the business, and take tips from them. Ask them, or how did you get there? Like, what did you do? Ask those questions. And I think another really important point, and I will leave it on, is start doing things from the get-go as you mean to go on. So what do I mean when I say that? I mean, if you start by coming in 20 minutes early or 10 minutes early, continue that, right? If you're not able to maintain that, then don't come in 10 minutes early. If you want to be someone who always sends around quotes to the people in the office, be that person who does that. Look for career paths and ways that you can get to the next level, and how do you get there? And usually, if you're in a good organization, they will have clear pathways for you to be able to be successful and get to the next level. But if it's not clear, then ask the right questions to understand how to get there. But I think those are some of the ones that I would definitely highlight.
I love those 3 punchy ones. So I was just taking some quick notes. I'm a huge advocate of developing your personal brand. And, sometimes, Pierre, you may move within an organization like another department or another division, and nobody knows you. It's very interesting. You're thinking, oh, I've been here for 10 years. Nobody knows you. You could be anybody. So you have to really be mindful of your brand and making sure that people know who you are. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be braggadocious. I don't know if there's a word like that, but you don't need to be a brag. You just be yourself and look for those organic opportunities. I remember connecting with someone that has become a really good part of my network while we were waiting for the kettle to boil for tea. I just turned around and just say, oh, and I just started to talk, and we've been friends for years and years and years. So sometimes these connections are just very organic. It's really having a posture that is open and that is where you have the confidence to initiate conversation, build your network, let people get to know you and know your name and know who you are. I also like about finding allies, looking for supporters as well, individuals that will support your career growth and that will speak up for you in rooms that you're not in. When opportunities come up that you may not be in the room, they'll say, oh, have you met Victoria? I think she'd be a great fit for XYZ. Why? Because Victoria said hello, they've seen her, and she gives off that really nice connection. And I love, begin the way you intend to continue, right? So if you're not a morning person, don't start your job coming in at 8:30 when it starts at 9, because I'm telling you, by week 3, you're going to be stressed out trying to make 8:30, and it's just not sustainable. So be authentic, be yourself, and begin the way that you would like to continue. Those are really great points. So Victoria, as we transition and we move around and we try to tell our stories and we try to make our pitch in interviews, what are some of the maybe 1 or 2 questions that you can think of that can stump an applicant when they're in an interview, when they're asked this, any particular questions, and how do you suggest that they answer those questions?
Wow. So I would think one of the, if you are shifting, I think one of the most important questions that an interviewer is going to ask is, why are you wanting, why are you changing career? Why are you interested in this company? And I did see a question in the chat, why are you interested in that company? That's where, as Pierre said earlier, make sure you've done your research on the company, make sure you've done your research on how your skills are transferable. But that's, if you just sit there and you say, oh, well, I hear, underwriters make loads of money, you're probably going to be in the no pile for a follow-up. But, you want to use that question, and it's going to happen, right? So prepare for it. So, why are you interested in this? Well, in my current role, I'm not feeling challenged, but, part of the skill set that I've learned is, problem solving and data analytics. So I think that I would be good, well placed to, pursue a career in this industry because I can utilize those skills. You also, I'm trying to think what other questions. I mean, quite frankly, one of the worst is, what do you know about us? Because they know everything about themselves, right? You need to prove that you've done your research. So, just saying, oh, I want to be an underwriter. Do you know what an underwriter does? And this goes back to LinkedIn and networking. You should be reaching out to people either in those companies or in those positions to say, right, what do you do? What's the best thing about your job? What's the worst thing? What skills do you need? All of those kind of things, so that when you get a question in an interview, you sound like you know what you're doing. The other thing I would say for an interview is, they're always going to ask at the end, have you got anything else to ask us, right? That is where you can show your interest. So again, LinkedIn, big fan. Once you're in my network, for example, if I like an article, if I post an article, you'll read it, right? So, maybe you're going into a reinsurance company and we've just had a hurricane, you can ask things like, oh, well, what's the impact of the hurricane had on your portfolio? Or do you think your appetite might change given, climate change and global warming, leading to more intense hurricanes? Sound like you know what you're talking about, and almost project that you're already there. And I think that's a good starting point.
Great. I love, love, love those questions. And even for those that may have been made redundant, be ready to answer those questions and come at it really confidently and be succinct and clear about why you're in that position and move forward. Okay. It's not something to dwell on. You shouldn't be like deer in headlights when that question is asked. Have a very clear and succinct response and move forward. Okay. I think that's very, very, very important. And also be prepared for some of those very generic questions, like tell me about yourself. So we've put a link in the chat that I recommend to anyone, because we won't have the time to go through all the questions, but it's on the Muse. And if you go on there, the link is already there, but you will see all the answers to all the questions that you can possibly be asked in an interview and how to respond to them. So tell me about yourself, your strengths, weaknesses, etc., or behavioral type question. Tell me about a time when. All those techniques are described and all the different answers and responses are laid out for you. So I hope that will be a very supportive resource for you. Please, please, please use that. It will really help you to practice, 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 so that when you're in those interviews, you can leave a nice, strong, and positive impression. Okay, so I have a question for Pierre. As a recruiter, what are some of the things that you would say make it easy for you to select one candidate over the other? You're on mute. You've not been waiting all this time to say that.
Apologies.
You're gonna get a gift. You're gonna get a gift for that one.
No, but the one thing that definitely, the first and foremost is, how does a CV look? I think we're in a day and age where I think the more snazzy you can make a CV look, i.e. putting in graphs, a nice photo of your face, I'm sure it looks great, but we don't want to see it, right? What you want to have is a very clean and concise profile and CV. So when your account manager is looking at it, all the font is the same size, first and foremost, it's neat, it's tidy, clear. I think Aaron was touching this on earlier as well. Clear achievements that you've done, clear responsibilities that you've had to do in your role. If you've left in a short space of time, giving them a reason why. I think job hopping is a touchy one, because I think for most people, there's always a reason behind it. For others, it's kind of negative, you kind of just moved for money, or you got fired for a certain reason. But I think regardless, you need to give a reason why, right? So, a brief reason. I think again, just kind of going back to the cover letter and the bio, I think those are probably going to be the most important things that stand out to me. You know, if someone's taken the time to actually have a look at the job spec and like what Aaron said, tailor their CV to reflect it. And, you know, people may think that it's a bit, you know, wrong to tailor your CV to make it look good for the job spec, but not at all, right? Is that you're able to do the same role, but you're slightly tweaking it to be appropriate for the role, and that's nothing wrong with that. So I think those are some of the main things.
Thank you. And I read something recently, which I thought was a really good tip. For each position, you have your role and you know, with all the data and descriptors there. And then if there are any accomplishments, to put that below that as well, so that they can see the accomplishments for each role that you've done. So that's a great way to highlight the roles and your accomplishments within the role. So whatever specific things that you achieved, you get an opportunity to highlight that there as well. I see a question here. What are the best steps for someone that desires career transition? Not entirely sure what the role to apply for. They only know they're interested in an organization and they want to find out more if that is a role that would suit them, that may not be advertised at the moment. Okay, so basically just a networking, right? You go online, see if you know anyone that works for that organization, you know, invite them to a coffee meeting or even a 15-minute virtual chat and just ask them some questions about themselves, their role, the role within the organization, what that company is like to work for, maybe get a good sense of the culture within that organization to see if that might be a good fit for you or not. Okay, so this is the world that we're in now where, you know, many people are reachable. They may not have an hour, they may have 15 minutes. You can do a lot in 15 minutes. How long does it take to pivot into insurance from a tech background? I think it's as fast or as slow as you want to go, right? You know, I remember when I moved from underwriting to claims and I thought, oh, how am I going to figure this out? Well, again, a lot of grit, persistence, hard work, applying yourself, those good things that you determine the pace at which you work. But I would say networking is really, really critical in terms of building that support.
Well, and Noreen, I'd like
Yes.
to add that it completely depends on what you put into it, right? So if
Absolutely,
you know,
yes.
what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it.
Yes.
So if you go for more of those 15, 30-minute copies or whatever, build that network, it will hopefully go faster, right? That you're more likely to get a job, going back to the other question, if you're first on the lips to come out when someone says, oh, we're looking for someone, right? Oh, well,
Absolutely.
you know, I've met Pierre and I've seen him on LinkedIn and I, you know, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we should have him in for an interview. So
I
get
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree with you. And I say this very, very often. I'm going to say this again. The time to build your network is not when you need it. It's in advance of it. So building your network should be something that you do all the time. It's something that you do on a daily basis so that when the time comes that you need to reach out to your network for support, they are there. Okay. So if you have not started building your network, please make that a professional priority for yourself. That is one gap that you can actually close. So the Muse link is just been uploaded into the chat. Please click on that. And that has I think 100 interview questions that you can possibly think of with all the suggested answers and all the suggested scenarios that can help to position you very, very well in the market, whatever
Noreen,
market you choose. Yes,
just
Pierre?
to add to that point, I just didn't want to
Please.
move on without saying, I think another thing to think when you're building your network, I know it can be sometimes quite daunting just to, you know, connect with someone on LinkedIn and drop them a message. Obviously, as a recruiter, it's something I do all the time. But, you know, for someone who has no relevance to message that person, it is quite out of the blue message. So what I would suggest is go into these forum events, you know, go into these conferences, start talking to people, you know, just build up the courage. I know sometimes it is a little bit nerve-wracking just to go and speak to a random person, but the more you do it, the more easy it will get, just like a muscle, right? So
Yeah.
I think going into these events, speaking to the people, you will start to organically build up a network, and then from there you can then message that person, do you know anyone it would be good to reach out to? They will refer you to someone, and then you're going into that next conversation with a warm lead going, this person said it would be good to reach out. Do you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to catch up, maybe go for a coffee this week? I very highly doubt that people in our market will say no to catch up for go for a coffee, right?
Yeah, they
were
love
going for one
coffee,
anyway.
they
They
love
were going for it
tea.
anyway.
Yes, they love drink, right?
Yeah.
I will say one of the things I would also suggest, starting in Bermuda, and I know this is also big in London, there are always seminars and conferences that are going on, and they're not all very expensive. You know, in Bermuda, they have like the insurance summit conference and different things. Sometimes they're like $500, etc. Consider it professional investment. You'll be surprised the individuals that you can meet at these types of conferences. So, you know, just really invest and invest your time to develop and craft a network that will serve you in the future. So we have a poll that is running. I told you guys that an hour is going to go fast. We're literally right on the hour mark. So I'm going to wrap up. Any last comment that anyone wants to add that for some reason we missed?
So I want to say that,
yes,
and it's a big thing with, especially with women, but if you see a job and you think, oh, it's the company I want to work for, it's the role I want to work for, but I don't have all the requirements that they're asking for, still apply, right? Even,
yes.
you know, if you don't have 100% of the skills, still apply. And then that's where you use your cover letter and then your amazing personality in the interview to kind of, to get through that. But don't give up.
Yes, I agree. I always say, just get me into that interview. Just
Yeah.
get me into that interview because I'm going to sell myself. Yeah. So a lot of times you see a job description and you think, I only have this or I only have that. Apply anyway. At least, even if you just get in front of the person, you get a chance for them to know you. And who knows, it can lead to a second call for another opportunity. That's how I got my job in the market. I applied for an underwriter job. I wasn't even an underwriter. I never even been a junior underwriter, but I figured I'm going to just go for it. And I got the interview. I got into the interview and the hiring manager says, now, why did you apply for that job? And I said, well, it got me here now, didn't it? Well, obviously I didn't get the job because I wasn't qualified peer to be an underwriter at the time. But he did say that there was this department that they were going to start up in 6 months and he would recommend me for being considered as an underwriter trainee. That was this little company called Excel Insurance. That's how I started my career in the industry. So you have to have self-belief. You have to put yourself out there and apply anyhow. You never know what can happen. Pierre, any last comments?
Yeah, I just a quick tip as well. I think one thing that we spoke about ahead of this was around sort of the salaries and sort of, you know, how to approach those questions. I think especially someone like myself who got into the market off what I thought was, you know, someone giving me an opportunity up until very recently in my career where I've started to really hone in on what my value is and what do I bring to a company. And now I know what I'm worth, right? Is, you know, you kind of have that imposter syndrome and you kind of think, you know, should I ask about the salary or should I just kind of take whatever they give me? I think it's so important for you to start on the market rates because it will only continue to then make sense from there. If you kind of go into it, you know, maybe take it a little bit lower than the market rate, you're always going to be behind the peers. So to avoid that, one thing I would definitely say is always asking the right questions. But before you to ask the right questions, you need to do your research. So first and foremost, you have the tools like Glassdoor, you have LinkedIn Salary Insights. There's lots of places where you can go and find out what the standard market salary is, find out what that is, understand what the typical standard at that level you're applying for, and then be realistic in terms of what skills and value you can bring to the company to be able to qualify you to hit that level of salary expectation, right? And then the final question, and it's honestly, when I heard this, it changed my sort of my approach when we talk about salary, is ask when the hiring manager, whoever HR asks you, you know, how much you're looking for, what you're looking for bottom line, or what would you accept? You flip the question back to them and you say, what is your budget for this role? You never tell them your salary first. You ask them what the budget. As a recruiter, I hate it, but you know, I can't help but answer the question if it's put upon me. So, you know, it's take the power back into your role once you have that information. That's the last thing I was just going to say.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a really good one. I spent a lot of time working with my clients around negotiating their salary, and it's very important that you understand what you're worth. In Bermuda, we may not have a lot of the public salary data that Pierre mentioned, but I tell you, when you're networking, that should be some of the questions that you should be asking. A question something like, what salary range should I be looking for based on my experience, based on my skill set? And ask a number of people. You will start to figure out exactly where you should be pitching your number. Aaron, any last comments?
Very, very quick, and it's kind of one we've already all shared, but it's the importance of resilience. I think a lot of times when you're looking for a job, looking for a role, you're sweeping a role, like Victoria said, you could be literally the perfect person on paper, but for whatever reason, it just does not work out. That does not mean that you need to go back and say, I'm horrible at this, I should have never done this, or start to that internal turmoil. It just means that there's something greater in store. So I think what comes to play with that is reminding yourself that you have to stick at it. Keep networking. A lot of times, if your CV, if you feel like you're not getting the pings from it, just give your CV a whole different look. A lot of times I always ask my clients, I say, don't sit there and think that you have it all answered, because you don't. Even I don't have it all answered. But when you look at it with a different perspective, it gives you sometimes the answer you're looking for that you didn't know was there. So refresh some of your points. Try to just swap around the order of it even, and just kind of make it a game for yourself to figure out, how can I say this without saying exactly how I have it written, and just keep at it. And I tell people all the time, my clients as well, there's not one person I've met who has never gotten a job after they've left another job. You know what I mean? Like, no one's ever sat here and be like, I haven't had a job in 40 years. So you will get a job. Just stay at it, be consistent, and always remember that you're going to be the addition to them. They're not doing you any favors.
Oh, I love that. So basically take the power back and understand that the interview process, the job process, it's also about you determining whether or not that organization is the organization that you want to invest your talent in. So when you go into an interview, please do not give up your power. Do those active listening that Pierre was talking about, that Victoria said earlier. Have questions to ask them as well. This is a partnership, right? Wherever you decide to work, it has to be a place where you feel that you are where you feel a sense of belonging, a sense of value and of worth, where you want to invest your talent and where you want to be engaged and where you really want to see yourself continuing to grow. So we just ran a really quick poll. Thank you to everyone that has participated. But 95% thought that this was fantastic, that they've spent a solid hour, and this information that we share was very useful to them. So I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Pierre, thank you for coming across the pond virtually. Victoria, thank you so much. All the best in your new role. I'm sure we will bump into each other again. Aaron, thank you so much for making yourself available. And for all those that have attended, thank you for taking this time to invest in yourself so that you can create the next career 2.0 that will be on your terms. Have a good afternoon. Have a good day wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.